Rosina Smith was born in England in 1862, during a period of rapid industrialization that transformed the country. Cities were growing crowded, factories proliferated, and commerce expanded, yet opportunities for working-class women remained limited. Social expectations for young women were rigid, emphasizing marriage and family as the primary goals of their lives. For those without wealth or influential family connections, the prospects for economic independence were minimal. Life for many young women included domestic service or other low-paying employment, with little chance of upward mobility. These social and economic conditions shaped the experiences of women like Rosina, forming the environment in which she grew up. The hardships faced by families without resources created circumstances where young women were often dependent on marriage for security and stability. Industrialized cities offered employment, but the work was typically exhausting, and the living conditions were challenging. Many women in her position experienced the tension between limited opportunities and societal expectations. England's economic transformation benefited some, but for the lower classes, it imposed restrictions and hardship. These factors influenced the decisions of young women considering emigration, providing both motivation and context for leaving home. Rosina's early life, shaped by these realities, set the foundation for her later choices. Without speculating on her individual experiences, it is clear that the environment was defined by strict gender roles, economic pressures, and limited avenues for personal advancement. The backdrop of industrial England provides a factual understanding of why emigration became a viable and appealing option for women like Rosina seeking independence and improved prospects abroad. During the 1870s and 1880s, the British government encouraged young, single women to emigrate to New Zealand. The colony required labor for domestic work, factories, farms, and other expanding sectors, while the male-to-female population imbalance created social and economic challenges. Immigration was promoted as a solution to these issues, offering opportunities for employment and a fresh start for women facing limited options in England. At 20 years old, Rosina Smith decided to leave her home country in 1882, boarding the ship Rangatiki bound for New Zealand. The voyage lasted approximately 3 months, during which conditions aboard the ship were cramped and uncomfortable. Hundreds of immigrants shared limited space, and food was rationed to sustain passengers for the duration of the journey. Sickness was common, and the confined environment added to the physical and psychological challenges of the passage. Despite these difficulties, Rossina and other passengers were motivated by the possibility of independence and improved circumstances in the new colony. The journey required endurance, patience, and adaptation to sustained hardship. Upon arrival in Auckland, the anticipation of new opportunities contrasted with the exhaustion and strain of the voyage. The experience of travel itself, with its duration and hardships, was a formative moment for Rossina. It marked a transition from the constrained social and economic realities of England to the uncertain prospects of colonial New Zealand. This move was motivated not only by the availability of labor, but also by the chance to create a life independent of familial or societal restrictions. Upon arriving in Auckland, Rosina began employment as a cook at the Exchange Hotel. This type of work was common for newly arrived women, as hotels, boarding houses, and private homes required domestic labor. The demand was driven by New Zealand's expanding timber industry, growing ports, and agricultural development. Employment opportunities were plentiful, though the work itself was physically demanding and often involved long hours. After approximately 1 month at the Exchange Hotel, Rosina moved to Thames, a town that had experienced economic growth following gold discoveries in previous decades. She resided in Thames for a period before returning to Auckland, where she worked at several establishments, including Harbourview House and the Duke of Cambridge Hotel. These movements reflected economic necessity and the need to secure stable employment, rather than personal instability. During her time in Auckland, Rosina claimed to have met William Wilson, a carpenter. According to her statements, she believed he could offer companionship and stability, although subsequent events would alter these expectations. Her account is limited to her perspective, and the narrative does not extend beyond what she reported. Employment at multiple locations, relocation between towns, and her interactions with others exemplify the patterns of survival and adaptation common among young immigrant women in the colony. These circumstances shaped her daily life, providing the context for subsequent personal and social decisions. Rosina's early period in New Zealand reflects both opportunity and challenge, grounded in economic necessity, labor demands, and the social structure of colonial towns. Each movement and job illustrates factual conditions that influenced her trajectory, preparing the background for the events that followed. However, she later stated that she discovered Wilson was already married, a revelation that ended any expectation of a future together. The consequences of this discovery, according to her account, left her facing social and economic realities independently. Subsequently, Rosina became pregnant, a situation complicated by the limited options available to unmarried women in late 19th century New Zealand. Returning to England was not feasible, and maintaining a dressmaking business in Newton while pregnant proved difficult. Employment options for an expectant mother were constrained by societal norms, and judgment against unwed mothers further restricted potential support or opportunities. These factors framed her pregnancy as a critical turning point in her life, influenced by social pressures rather than personal failure. Her account emphasizes the practical implications of her situation, highlighting the challenges faced by women navigating independent lives under restrictive societal expectations. The combination of isolation, economic necessity, and social judgment shaped the environment in which she made subsequent decisions. Rosina's experiences reflect broader patterns of vulnerability for women in similar circumstances. By documenting these events strictly as reported by Rosina and supported by historical context, Rosina relocated to a lodging house in Parnell managed by Mr. and Mrs. Wake. Upon arrival, she identified herself as Rosina Wilson. In late July, she gave birth to a daughter, Emily, in circumstances that were reportedly uncomplicated. The child was healthy, aside from a mild rash that required no medical intervention. Following the delivery, Rosina experienced fatigue and the common physical challenges associated with new motherhood. Her recovery was observed over several days, with attention to her ability to move about and perform routine tasks. Despite her best efforts to care for Emily, Rosina's reserved nature and limited social interactions meant that the Wakes knew little of her personal history. She had previously mentioned her voyage to New Zealand aboard the Rangatiki, but otherwise shared minimal information about her past. The nurse who assisted during the birth departed on August 7th, leaving Rosina to manage the newborn independently. Observers noted that she appeared to be recovering physically, though adjusting to the responsibilities of motherhood presented ongoing challenges. Her interactions within the lodging house remained limited, and the Wakes had no substantial knowledge of her life prior to arrival. These observations were factual and focused on her physical condition and the daily circumstances following childbirth. The combination of fatigue, the demands of infant care, and social isolation provides context for understanding the environment in which subsequent events unfolded. Rosina's initial weeks at the lodging house established a baseline of routine and adjustment prior to the events of August 16th, forming a factual record of her life as a new mother, without drawing conclusions about her behavior or intentions. On the night of Saturday, August 16th, a storm affected Parnell, with high winds and heavy rain. Rosina left the lodging house carrying her infant and was absent for several hours. When she returned, she was alone, and her clothing was wet and covered in mud. Mr. Wake questioned her regarding the child, and she offered vague and evasive explanations. Her manner was distant, and she did not provide a clear account of where the baby had been during her absence. The following day, her behavior drew further attention. She appeared agitated, restless, and unable to eat. Mr. and Mrs. Wake observed her withdrawal and noted increasing inconsistencies in her story. Rosina's responses failed to clarify the events of the previous night, raising concern for the welfare of the child. Observations focused on her physical appearance, behavior, and interaction with the lodging house occupants. There were no confirmed reports of harm at that point, but the uncertainty regarding the infant's location prompted further monitoring. The documented account emphasizes the factual sequence of her departure, return, and subsequent conduct. The Wakes' concern grew as Rosina continued to exhibit unusual behavior, without offering coherent explanations. Reports from the lodging house described these actions in objective terms, noting agitation, lack of nourishment, and evasive communication. The events of August 16th and 17th established the factual circumstances leading to investigation and intervention by authorities. This record focuses solely on observed behavior and statements, avoiding interpretation or judgment, and provides the context for the search and questioning that followed. On Monday, August 18th, Mr. Wake decided to search Rosina Smith's room after observing her continued agitation and inconsistencies regarding her daughter's whereabouts. Initially, Rosina claimed that she had given the baby to friends, providing a statement that appeared implausible to the Wakes. Upon further questioning, her composure broke, and she admitted a different account, stating that she had given the infant laudanum, an opium-based medicine, due to the child's illness, and that Emily subsequently fell unconscious. Rosina further explained that, in a moment of desperation, she had thrown the baby over the cliffs at Parnell. When asked for specifics, she claimed the darkness of the night prevented her from recalling the exact location. Following this confession, Mr. Wake informed Constable Hobson, who arrived at the lodging house to question Rosina. During the questioning, she did not provide coherent or consistent details, speaking in disjointed fragments and giving contradictory statements about the events of the previous Saturday. Her responses deepened the constable's suspicions, while leaving the exact circumstances unclear. News of the missing infant and Rosina's statements spread quickly through Parnell, capturing the attention of the local community. Residents discussed the situation in streets, shops, and neighboring homes, expressing concern and curiosity about the child's fate. The combination of Rosina's confession, her erratic behavior, and the widespread community awareness established a heightened sense of urgency. The events prompted both police investigation and ongoing public discourse, marking the escalation from a private concern within the lodging house to a case that involved authorities and attracted widespread attention from the local population. Following the reports from Mr. Wake, Mr. Herbert Gent contacted Constable Hobson regarding a previous encounter with a young woman carrying an infant on the evening of August 16th. Gent recalled that the child had been crying and that the woman had appeared anxious, asking for directions through a property belonging to Mr. Mason. Authorities, including Detective Toohey, Detective Walker, and Constable Hobson, conducted a search of the area with Rosina present, transporting her in a horse-drawn cart to retrace her steps. As they approached the location, Rosina became visibly distressed, gripping the sides of the cart and crying out, indicating fear and recognition of the area. The investigators began a careful search of Mason's garden, moving leaves and examining soil. They soon uncovered the body of an infant beneath the surface, wrapped in a knitted shawl. Despite some swelling of the face from the soil, the body was sufficiently preserved to confirm identity. Mrs. Wake was called to identify the child, confirming that it was Rosina's daughter, Emily. Dr. Cobbert conducted a post-mortem examination at the police station, observing no external injuries or signs of strangulation. Internally, the organs were reported healthy, but early indications suggested suffocation as the cause of death. The contents of the stomach were preserved in a sealed jar and sent to Dr. Pond for further examination, as directed by Superintendent Thompson. The discovery of Emily's body, the documentation of her condition, and the post-mortem findings provided investigators with factual evidence while remaining strictly observational, forming the foundation for subsequent legal proceedings. Following the discovery of Emily's body, public attention in Auckland and Parnell intensified. Residents speculated about the identity of the infant's father, given Rosina's earlier statements that she had been deceived by a man named William Wilson, who had promised to marry her but was already married. Some members of the community criticized Mr. Wake for involving authorities, suggesting he acted too quickly, while others defended his actions, emphasizing that reporting the situation had led to the discovery of the child and the prompt involvement of police. Newspapers covered the story extensively, documenting both the events and community responses, contributing to widespread discussion about the case. An inquest was scheduled to examine the circumstances of Emily's death, overseen by the coroner, Dr. Filson, with testimony from Mr. and Mrs. Wake, Rosina, and medical professionals. Following the inquest, Rosina Smith was formally charged with the murder of her child and detained pending trial. The trial commenced on Monday, October 6, 1884, at the Supreme Court in Auckland. The prosecution was led by Mr. Hudson Williamson, while Mr. G.N. Bassey represented the defense. The defense argued that Rosina was suffering from mental instability and that the child's death could have been accidental, citing her postpartum condition and lack of intent. The prosecution countered, emphasizing that Rosina's actions were deliberate and that she understood the nature of her behavior. Witnesses who had previously testified at the inquest repeated their accounts, and doctors provided opinions on her mental state. Rosina herself testified, denying intentional harm while admitting limited memory of events. The judge instructed the jury to consider three possibilities: willful murder, insanity, or accidental death. Jurors were urged to base their decision strictly on evidence, reviewing the testimony, medical opinions, and documented sequence of events before reaching a verdict. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict for Rosina Emily Smith. She was found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter rather than murder. The judge, taking into account her emotional state and the circumstances surrounding the birth and death of Emily, sentenced Rosina to 6 months of hard labor. Following her conviction, questions continued regarding the identity of the child's father, William Wilson, who had not been located despite repeated inquiries. Public speculation extended to whether Mr. Wake, who had reported Rosina to the authorities, might have been involved in her pregnancy, although no evidence confirmed this, and these claims remained part of community discourse rather than judicial proceedings. In July of the following year, Mr. Wake, reportedly suffering from alcohol-related issues, attacked his wife with an axe, mistakenly believing her to be dead. She survived the attack, and Wake was sentenced to 2 years' imprisonment for the assault, which fueled further speculation regarding his possible connection to Rosina's pregnancy. Rosina's life following her release from prison is not documented, and her subsequent fate remains unknown. Her case, however, reflects broader social realities faced by many women who emigrated to New Zealand in the late 19th century. Alone and without familial support, immigrant women often confronted limited options, harsh societal judgments, and economic pressures that left them vulnerable. Rosina's experience illustrates the challenges of navigating such a society while facing personal crises, demonstrating the interplay between societal expectations, isolation, and the tragic consequences that could arise from constrained opportunities and social pressures. Her story remains a documented example of the difficulties encountered by women in her position during this period.